session, I want to announce the results of that Madam Vandana Puri gave you 40 questions that I sent. They were difficult questions. They were quite difficult questions, and I'm very pleased that many of them correct. Unfortunately, not everybody can be a winner. So everybody is a winner because everybody tried and everybody did. All of you are winners. OK, amongst the winners are the top two winners, which are 23 and Yashika Garg. Anjali will get an autographed copy of Robbins and Cotran Pathologic Basis of Disease, and Yashika will get the autographed copy of Basic Pathology, which is the. So now that let me also mention that two others who were very close, Ujala Sharma and Shalu Singh. Congratulations to all of you. OK, now we begin. We begin by telling you a small story. It's true story. You believe me, OK? By the way, I want to tell you, your Madam Vandana is very cruel, OK? She made me go through multiple hoops to get to this place. Get a PhD in this. I'm not going to get a PhD in this. It's too late. I'm technologically very challenged, OK? So forgive me if I make errors transmission and let me know if it happens. Vandana, you'll.
I am there, sir. I'll be supporting you each and every step wherever you need me.
अभी उसके पहले तो आपने मुझको PhD करवा दी ना इसमें.
I'm sorry for that, sir.
Acha, you know, I want to start with a story. It's a true story, absolutely. The story is this, that, you know, several months ago, a very prominent person received a threat from a terrorist. Okay, unless you do this thing, you will be killed, or unless you give us this, you'll be killed. Okay, obviously that person was very worried, very worried. So, you know, he went to Delhi and said, who's the best private detective here? So they said, oh, sir, no problem. Okay. So this is the story called Ek Tha Jasoos. So this is the Jasoos in Delhi who was asked, go find out who was threatening, who were terrorizing this poor man, well-known man, but otherwise very simple man, very poor man. So you go find out. So his investigations, actually her investigations, you see that the detective is a woman. Her investigations led to this city which has this temple. And in this particular city, what did she find? She found this picture on Instagram. This picture of the terrorist who was standing outside this room looking for Dr. Vinay Kumar, thinking that this is his office. Alas, that is not his office. It was the wrong place, Vandana. That was the room in which he used to stay when he was in Medical College, Amritsar. Anyway, so as you can see, your Madam Vandana has multiple roofs. Part-time terrorist bhi karti hain, aap pata kar lena dhyan se, okay? And I'm sure she terrorizes students. So if they terrorize you, just send me an email and I'll send the same detective to find, okay? Okay, anyway, to be honest with you, this is how the whole thing started. I got this picture from a colleague at Amritsar where she had gone as an examiner, and and I said, who is this person? And there were actually 2 or 3, each one of them, differently. Okay, and this is this person, this is this person, this is from Patiala, this is from here, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I said I want to get in touch with this young lady who is standing outside my former hostel room. And the way they put the plaque, it looks like I'm inside, and I live inside or work inside. Okay, on the bottom in very, very small letters it says batch of 1962, 1967. Okay.
Sir, I'll tell you one thing. Many of the messages which came to me were, does her stay here still now? Is it so?
Anyway, so that is how I got to know Vandana. Okay, and we started to talk about pathology and various other things and so on and so forth. And so in the process, she said, well, would you be able to come and address our students? I said, yes, I'm happy to do that. And there are many things I can talk about, but we finally agreed that I'm going to talk about the history of Robbins pathology. Okay. And I hope that you will find it interesting. It also has a history of myself in the process. And again, I hope you'll find it interesting and useful. Okay, so next we go. So I want to talk to you, my title of my talk is very long, Past, Present and Future of Pathology as seen from the evolution of Robbins pathology. Really, the story of Robbins pathology is the story of pathology, certainly pathology education around the world, and I'm sure you know that. Okay. And by the way, on the left side, one side of the screen, you see this beautiful fountain, and it is in a very nice big park in Chicago, not far from where I live. On the other side is the insignia of University of Chicago. I hope you'll come to Chicago. Some of you will come to Chicago. I'll be happy to take you to the university as well as show you this wonderful fountain. So at the outset, I want to dedicate this talk to the medical students of India and rest of the world for giving me the inspiration and energy to continue writing the books. Writing books is very, very hard. Most people don't realize how tedious it is, how long it takes. You know, to revise an edition takes 2 years, okay? Because you basically almost read the whole thing all over again, make a sentence change here, a sentence change there, etc., etc. So the only reason one can keep on doing it is because you give me the feedback. You, the students, the users, the faculty, tell me that you like it, you find it useful, and that provides the energy to keep on continuing. Of course, I'm also very, very grateful to my teachers, many of them in India, and particularly the pathology department at Amritsar, where I decided that I was going to become a pathologist, for all the knowledge they gave me, and I hope I'm giving them my Guru Dakshina by imparting knowledge to others. Okay. So I want to sort of start this by giving you a little quotation, which is medical history teaches us where we come from, where we stand in medicine at the present time, and in what direction we are marching. It is a compass that guides us in the future. Unfortunately, history of medicine is not really taught or discussed in any medical colleges now. There used to be many years ago, history of medicine used to be a little module for 4, 5, 6 lectures where people were to read about the history, how we came where we are. And I think, as it says here, history tells us where we came from, where we stand today, and where we will go in the future. It gives us a context. It gives us a background. It gives us a background. And I think it's good. I hope some of you will be encouraged to go read about history of medicine, history of medicine around the world, history of medicine in India, for example. India has a very rich history in the past in medicine. So I hope that this history that I will tell you about Robbins pathology will fit in that same idea. Okay. So who was Stanley Robbins? He was born in 1915 and died in 2003. He was born in a state of the US called Maine, in a city called Portland. He graduated at the top of his class from Brookline High School in Brookline, Massachusetts. He subsequently went to MIT and Tufts Medical School, delivering valedictorian addresses at both schools. Valedictorian is the person who has the highest marks, the person who's first in the class. Okay, so he was a brilliant student. He trained in pathology at Boston City Hospital and then joined the faculty at Boston University School of Medicine, where he practiced as a surgical pathologist and conducted research in coronary artery disease and reproductive endocrinology. He also taught second-year medical students. Now, many people think that Robbins, the only thing he did in his life was to write this book. No, not at all. He was actually a very good researcher. He very early studies on the platelet role of platelets in coronary thrombosis, and he actually devised the first test for what is called sort of the frog test, okay, in which you take the urine from pregnant females and inject them into something else, and then you see ovulation. Then that became a rabbit test and so on and so forth. And he also taught medical students. So he's a brilliant man. And he joined the Department of Pathology at Boston City Hospital. So Dr. Robbins is sitting on my left. I don't know, it could be the person who has a bow tie, okay? Youngish guy, bow tie. Okay? The other guy was wearing a regular tie, but he's wearing a bow tie. So he joined Boston City Hospital as his first academic appointment in 1944. It so happens I was born in the year 1944. Okay, or he know that we would eventually meet. People sitting in this group here were all sort of eminent pathologists of that time. Boston City Hospital was one of the leading departments of pathology in the country at that time, okay, and still remains so. Includes people like Jackson, Mallory. You heard Mallory's highlighted. This named after Dr. Mallory, who was at the Boston City Hospital, and that Department of Pathology is now called the Mallory Department of Pathology, okay, or Mallory Institute of Pathology. So he was in the company of very, very distinguished pathologists and a very, very excellent group of people. So Dr. Robbins described in an article published in, I believe it was 1984, about the beginning of Robbins Pathology, which happened between the years 1950 and 1957. So he wrote, as a young and bushy-tailed member of the faculty at the Boston University School of Medicine, I was heavily engaged in lecturing, but was increasingly dissatisfied with the texts available to students. While all had redeeming qualities, all, in my view, placed descriptive morphology, as would be useful for professional pathologists rather than students, and insufficient emphasis on the correlation of the morphologic changes with their clinical significance. That is the resultant clinical symptoms and signs. And what Robbins noticed was that the report at that time were all very heavy on describing morphological features. Gross, micro, etc., etc., etc. Kind of details which will be required for somebody who's going to do diagnostic work, not students who are going to become doctors with multiple specialties. And Robbins felt that pathology should be connected to the practice of medicine and their clinical significance, and that was missing in many of the books at that time. He used to jokingly say, lesions don't arise in cadavers, or lesions arise in living people. So why is it that the focus of pathology is autopsy pathology, for example, which was very, very big at that time? Because of this belief of his, between 1950 and 1957, he wrote the first edition of the book, which was at that time called Textbook of Pathology with clinical applications. He made it clinical applications. He was very sure that people understood that this was not just descriptive pathology, but also pathology with clinical pathology correlations. Now, things you take for granted right now. That's the way pathology is taught in the world right now. That was not the case in that. We memorize gross, micro features, subtle features here and there. This stain this, that stain this, and so on and so forth. Now, this book was humongous. 1,350 pages, almost 1,000 illustrations. And who was the author? One single author, Stanley Robbins. You can go to the library and search for major textbooks. The only other book that you will find, which was written by a single author and became very popular, was Guyton's Physiology. Everything else was multiple. That was Robbins' passion. That was his belief. It was his conviction that this is important to do. And so he did himself. So in the preface of the book he wrote, but the study of morphology is only one facet of pathology. Pathology contributes much to clinical medicine. The pathologist is interested not only in the recognition of structural alterations, which is morphology, but also in their significance, that is the effects of these changes function and ultimately the effect of these changes on the patient. This is not a discipline isolated from the living patient, but rather a basic approach to a better understanding of disease and therefore a foundation of sound clinical medicine. So Robbins felt that the study of pathology, okay, it should lead you to understand medicine better and practice medicine better. And he said in one of his essays, the why and how are as important as what signifies morphology, why is etiology, and how is pathogenesis. So those are as important as the descriptive morphology. So when the book was first published in 1957, the published to the eminent pathologists of that time. And this is what they heard. Two senior pathology academic giants were strongly negative. Since there was not enough descriptive morphology and too heavy clinical. But a Temple University medical student, Temple University is in Philadelphia, a medical student wrote to the publishers, I have begun reading my new Robbins textbook. I know someone up there loves me, which means you're saying, I know there's a God there who loves me. Okay. So look at the sharp contrast between how the students felt and how the senior pathologists felt. And Robbins subsequently told me that he was very reviews by the senior pathology academic giants, because if they had said this is a good book, then he had failed. Because then it would mean that he just wrote another book just like the other books there. So he was pleased that the students accepted it, and the professor's initial reaction was, this is not pathology. Okay. Anyway, rest of it is a history. The teaching of pathology changed as Robbins' book became basically the syllabus of pathology in most medical schools in the world, even now, for example. So that is how the whole thing began. And that was the conviction, the passion of Dr. Robbins. He was a man who was sort of very used to cracking jokes, and I'll show you other examples of that. Well, my screen is being cut, but there's a quotation there. It says, well, damn it, gentle people, if you can't recognize acute and chronic, non-specific, multiple this. It was a joke that pathologists, the less they know about something, the longer there is a description. Okay? They're just so focused on describing. So, as many of you probably know, if you have read the book, there are jokes scattered throughout the book. This was also something Robbins did. And here is one example. This is in the section on pigmentation, and I think in one of the first chapters. It says that tattooing, now largely out of style, which of course is now back in style, may cause an innocuous but sometimes embarrassing nature. Distressing property of persisting in situ throughout life in dermal macrophages, creating difficulties if one wishes to marry Alice, and when the tattoo says Mary. Okay? He didn't have to write this joke. All he was saying was that tattoo is an indigestible dye, or okay, which gets taken up by macrophages, which then are long-lived. Okay, it can't be digested, and they live for a very, very long time. That is all he was trying to say, but he said this in the form of a joke. So the students felt there's somebody talking to them, or they were working hard at 2 a.m. in the morning and read this thing and they smile. And Robbins did this deliberately. He wrote his books in a very conversational style, as if he was having a conversation with the students. So early years of Robbins Pathology. In 1957 was the first edition. In 1962 was the second edition. In 1967 was the third edition. In the third edition, he added a chapter on genetic diseases, which was way ahead of his time because the human karyotype had been really discovered only about 10 years before that, late 50s and so on and so forth. So Robbins was very forward thinking. He knew that genetics is going to play a very important role in disease pathogenesis. So he chose to write a new chapter in the third edition of his book on genetics. So although Robbins was by now the dominant text, Robbins was not satisfied. He took another daring step. I want you to understand and appreciate that Robbins could have just continued the way he was, fourth edition, fifth edition, sixth edition. No. That was not what he did. He took another daring step. What he did was, before he published a brand new book, Pathologic Basis of Disease, first edition, 1974. 10th edition of this book, which is actually 10th plus 3, 13th edition, if you count the first 3 editions of his first book. So what did Robbins do? He rewrote the book completely. And he rewrote the book completely because by that time, a lot had been learned about biochemistry of diseases and, things had been learned. And he wanted to focus the book on mechanism of disease. It is pathogenesis, pathophysiology. And this was the focus of the book. It was not the previous book just modified. It was rewritten completely from scratch. Again, single author, Stanley Robbins. The passion of the man. I, of course, had the good fortune of knowing him. Okay, he was just so intensely passionate about pathology and teaching pathology. Okay, that he would go to any degree to do something which he truly believed in, and he truly believed the time had come to emphasize more and more disease mechanisms, because disease mechanisms help you understand how the disease, and then also help you understand what the clinical features might be, which in turn helps you understand how to treat the disease. So in 1974, he published this new first edition of this book, which was actually the 4th edition if you count it from the scratch. Okay. So it was a very bold move by him. Again, single author. He didn't ask anybody else to join him at that time. But then, and the first edition of this Pathologic Basis of Disease was completely written, single author, more focused on mechanisms. And of course, the general pathology section increased from 500 pages to 545 pages, that is where we were learning most about disease mechanisms. But this was just the beginning of. Robbins was never satisfied. Despite the fact he had great success, people loved his book, nobody said change it, modify it. He truly believed that more things had to be done. And then what happened? The second edition of Pathologic Basis of Disease comes, and now for the first time since 1950, and this was 1979, for the first time, so you can see this second issue was 1979. For the first time, he took a co-author. The co-author was Dr. Robbins and Cotran. Why did he do that? He did that because he felt that he was no longer himself studying disease mechanisms. He was not actually doing any research on disease mechanisms. And he thought that the focus of the book was on disease. So he should have someone who is who's a pathologist, but also an investigator. Okay. Robbins' investigative career ended many, many years ago. And he felt that he was deficient in it. It takes a great man to realize, to acknowledge that there is something that he needs to ask somebody else to help. So he asked Robbins and Cotran. So the second edition of Pathologic Basis of Disease was 1979 and published, written by Robbins and Cotran. This is Dr. Robbins and Cotran, okay, a person who became almost like my elder brother. So Robbins and Cotran was born 15 years later, younger than Robbins. Unfortunately, he died in 2000 because of a metastatic melanoma. He was born in Haifa in Palestine in 1932. He went to medical school at an American University of Beirut in Lebanon, which is a very fine university. I visited that. Then he came to Boston to do residency in pathology at the Boston City Hospital, where Dr. Robbins was, okay, from 1956 to 1959. And then he joined the faculty of Harvard Medical School from 1960 to 74, based first in Boston City Hospital, and then subsequently in 1974 he moved to the Department of Pathology at the Brigham Hospital, which is one of the finest pathology departments or hospitals actually in the world. Top pathology departments in the world. It was all Dr. Ramsey Cotran who really did that, okay, between 74 and 2000. So what was special about Ramsey Cotran? Ramsey Cotran was trained as a renal pathologist. He was a pioneer investigator. He was the first one who showed that pyelonephritis, in most cases, is an ascending disease. The infection comes from lower urinary tract towards the kidney. He was amongst the first people to demonstrate that glomerular permeability depended on the charge of the basement membrane. He was amongst the first people to show, along with Dr. Guido Mino, that in acute inflammation, the changes occur in microvasculature. Increased permeability occurs in post-capillary venules. He was also, with Judah Folkman, the first person to describe angiogenesis as an important part of the life of a tumor, which of course you know now that, and then of course he described the endothelial molecules, you know, which are selectins and integrins and so on, which you know a lot more about right now. Okay? He was the one who discovered these things. Okay? And you can see the application. Angiogenesis is now understood to be a very important part of tumor progression. There are anti-angiogenics used, okay, and of course endothelium has become very central to many human diseases. He was also an outstanding diagnostic pathologist, and he was every society of any connection with pathology or nephrology. Okay. And he was called a pathologist, which is said, you know, when pathologists needed advice, they would call Ramsey Cotran. And he was so gracious, so generous, he would never say no to anybody. Anybody who called him for advice, somebody who was writing a research grant to review that, somebody who was writing a paper to review that, and other people who had difficulty in certain aspects of pathology, they would all call him because he was so brilliant. But not just brilliant, he was also very giving at the same time. So what are the kind of changes that Ramsey Cotran brought to the book? He added hard science to the book, which is exactly why Robbins wanted him. He wanted a scientist to join the book, scientist and pathologist. For example, he now had 3 pages on free radical injury in cell injury chapter. Of course, we know now free radicals are involved in many human diseases, many. Not just cell injury, for Alzheimer's disease, and you name it. Reperfusion injury in the heart, for example. And he wrote 5 pages on the chemical mediators of inflammation. Now, medical students hate this thing because they have to memorize them. But I hope you appreciate many of the anti-inflammatory drugs that we use today are based on understanding how these cyclooxygenases and lipoxygenases and prostaglandins and leukotrienes, how they're formed and what do they do. So he brought a new vision to the book, and it was a blend of Robbins' style. The style still remained the same, and Ramsey Cotran's science. A new, more exciting, more invigorating Robbins had emerged. Okay. So in 1982, Dr. Robbins retired from the Boston City Hospital. Unfortunately, I don't know if I can. I have a pointer. Okay, good. So this is Dr. Robbins, and this is Dr. Ramsey Cotran. He was head of the pathology department there, and there are other people here, many of whom are now very big names in the pathology world. Okay. So now, while all of this is going on, Dr. Robbins wrote another book, Basic Pathology, with Marcia Angel. Marcia Angel was a medical student at Boston University, and eventually she became a co-author with him. So why did he write another book? So he wrote as an explanation in the preface of Basic Pathology, the first edition of which was published in 1971. Or books as well. See, he always had jokes in what serious things he said. Or books as well as men, it may be observed that fat ones contain thin ones inside, struggling to get out. In a sense, this book bears such a relationship to its more substantial progenitor, Robbins Pathology. It arose from an appreciation of the modern medical student's dilemma. As the curriculum has become restructured to place greater emphasis on clinical experience, time for reading is correspondingly curtailed. So what did he say? He said rare and esoteric lesions are omitted without apology. Okay, rare congenital malformations and rare diseases are just omitted, not written at all. And infrequent or trivial ones described only briefly. But he felt it is important, however, to consider rather fully the major disease entities. So if you compare the description, for example, of myocardial infarction and the big Robbins, the baby Robbins, it's more or less the same, because that's a very important disease, and Robbins didn't want to cut down on important diseases. He made the decision of what were uncommon and probably not so important for a medical student. Okay. Those are removed, and then others which were sort of given some brief descriptions, but major diseases were still covered in full detail. So this is the my screen. You can see it says 1972, and so this is a picture of the faculty at the Boston City Hospital in 1972, when Dr. Robbins sitting in the middle here, Dr. Cotran is sitting here, and this is Dr. Gottlieb, who later on became department chairman, and these are some of them are residents and others are faculty. Okay. Now 72 is an important because I joined the Department of Pathology in Boston in 1972 after having finished my MD at Ames. Ames Delhi. To Boston to do research. I was interested in leukemogenesis, carcinogenesis, and very fortunately for me, almost within 2 years, I was able to, along with my other colleagues, able to publish this very important paper on the genetic resistance to leukemia in mice. Basically, without going into details, we discovered that a new cell type, not T cells, not B cells, non-macrophages, were involved in resistance against leukemia in mice. These cells were substituted. 2 other groups of people found the same thing, and collectively we decided they will be called natural killer cells, NK cells. So as I said, I was very fortunate. I was able, within 2 years of being there, making such an important discovery, which has occupied my entire research career after that. I've spent my entire career after that working on NK cells, the receptors, the signaling, and all those. So after publishing this paper and a couple of others after that, in 1976, I got in my NIH first NIH grant, which I kept until 2012-13, and in 1979, I had published many papers, more papers in leading journals. Okay, and I had obtained a grant, and this was my lab at that time. I had a senior technician, Mary Carol Barnes, and my first MD PhD student, John Lust, who's now a professor of medicine at Mayo Clinic. And that's of course me, of course. Believe me, I actually had this much hair at one time. So life was beautiful. I was successful. I had students. I had smart people working with me. I was publishing more and more papers. What more could one ask for? Well, then one day in 1970, Dr. Robbins called me to his office, and that he threw was a lightning bolt on me. Dr. Robbins here, and this is me here. Okay. And what happened? He said to me, he used to call me Vinny. Vinny, in another year or two, I'm going to retire. I wonder if you would be willing to co-author on my textbook. Me? I was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was doing. I was just speechless for almost like a full 1 or 2 minutes. So, he said, look, this is a very important thing, important decision that you have to make, and you should not hurry to tell me your answer. And that your concern will be that you will have less time for research. Because I used to see Dr. Robbins writing textbooks. I mean, he was spending God knows how many hours every day, every week. So I said, thank you very much, sir, of course. And then I walked out and met one of my senior colleagues, Dr. Michael Bennett. And he said, what happened? I mean, he literally saw I was shaken. He said, what happened? I said, Dr. Robbins called me into his office and said that he wants me to be co-author with him. And he said, what did you say? I said, I have to think about it. He said, you're an idiot. How can you say no to something like this? Many senior pathologists were salivating to be asked by Robbins to be co-author. And you have been in a plate and you have to think about it. But I said, sure, I can do it. And one of the best gifts Dr. Michael Bennett gave me was to tell me, you can do it. He was senior to me. You probably saw an author of that paper that I showed you earlier, Michael Bennett. He said, you can do it. It's not impossible. I said, okay, if it's not impossible, then it's not impossible. So that is how I joined him. And the first book he asked me to work with was Basic Pathology, because that was next in line for publication. So in 1981, the third edition of this Basic Pathology came with 3 names: Robbins, Robbins, Angel, and Kumar. Angel is Marcia Angel. Now, Marcia Angel was actually, she was no longer actually. She had left and joined the New England Journal of Medicine. I don't know, I'm sure the faculty and postgraduates. New England Journal of Medicine, the premier medical journal in the world. And she had this distinction of being the first chief of New England Journal of Medicine. So she left and became editor of NEG. And it was basically Dr. Robbins and myself who were left. And then over in the 4th edition, it was third edition you saw was 3 of us, Robbins, Angel, and Kumar. And then the 4th edition, Marcia Angel left, so it was Kumar. And in the 5th edition, Dr. Ramsey Cotran joined us and became the Kumar Cotran Robbins. Okay, and then 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th edition is currently in press. And I'll tell you more about my co-authors in there. So what was it that I brought to Basic Pathology workbook? Since I was a serious molecularly, I brought more and more disease mechanisms, molecular basis of disease. I'm also, having trained in India, we had to draw, we would see a slide, then we had to draw the cells and this organelles and nuclei and so forth. So I got very good at actually drawing pictures of lesions. And so I was the one who actually introduced a lot of new schematic diagrams in it. And I also wrote the book when it had 4 colors in it rather than just black and white. And the book became an incubator for the big book. So anything new we wanted to try, okay, we would try it here. And if it appeared successful, then we would do it in the big Robbins also. So I joined Dr. Robbins and Dr. Cotran as the editor, author in the 3rd edition. Okay, you remember the 1st edition was Robbins only, 2nd was Robbins and Cotran, the 3rd one was Robbins, Cotran and Kumar. Okay, I did this one. Okay. Published in 1993. Yes. And then in basic pathology, Dr. Robbins and myself, and we wrote this many editions. So what I want to show you by this particular slide is not that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, how many, not the numbers. As I put in the title of the slide, Robbins, Cotran, Kumar, a 23-year partnership made in heaven. Why do I say this was a partnership made in heaven? It's a partnership made in heaven because it was a partnership of equals. I was the junior-most person. Dr. Cotran was a famous guy, but Dr. Robbins was famous for all the books that he had written. I was the little guy who joined the group. But you know, from day one, when I became a co-author, they treated me as equal. And I had the same rights to criticize, to modify, to tell them that this is not good, rewrite it and so on, as they had from me. This was based on trust and mutual respect. And it's very important, a very important lesson I learned there was and open to junior people. Because a lot of good ideas come from junior people. Senior people are tired and old, and they don't have that many new ideas. The new ideas mostly come from young people. And I think this was the reason why we were able to remain partners for 23 years. Unfortunately, the partnership ended in 2000. Okay. But this sustained, this partnership and the excellence of the book sustained for this long because of the way we became equal partners in the process. There are very few multiple authors which last for this longer time, because eventually somebody becomes jealous of somebody else, okay, and says, oh, you know, he looks smarter, he's getting more credit, and it breaks. It didn't happen to us. That's why I say it was made in heaven. A lesson in writing books was a lesson in living life. So Ramsey Cotran died unfortunately in 2000, and so which is when we had done the 6th edition. In the 7th edition, I had to find 2 other people because Robbins was retired, Cotran had died, and I had to find 2 other people to be co-authors, and I have to find them. Fortunate, I found Dr. Abul Abbas, who was an Ames graduate, 2 years junior to me, and Nelson Fausto, who was in Seattle, head of the department. We jokingly said, look, this is a book written by 3 FMGs, 3 foreign medical graduates. He was from Brazil, from India. And you know, I felt it was so important to make the names of Robbins live forever that I changed the name of the book to Robbins and Cotran, Pathologic Basis. Prior to this, this was the only name of the title of the book. I added this as a respect, and so that their name would live forever, because they had done so much for this book. Well, fast forward, the 10th edition was published in 2020, and I'm proud to tell you that South Asia edition is the first regional edition of our textbooks. Well, I'm also happy to tell you that last year we brought a brand new book. It's all digital, very interactive, not yet available in India. I hope eventually it will be. This is Robbins Pathology, 42 years, 1979 to 2021, 19 editions, and the journey continues. And it's been a wonderful journey, and I hope to keep on and stay on this journey. My brains and my body allow. This is the current team. Abul Abbas, John Hospital, and Andrea, who was one of my residents and who is now a very distinguished educator at Duke University. So I know I'm running. Vandana, how much time I have left?
So,
10
so
minutes?
You can take 5 minutes. Yeah, sir, it's 10
Oh, 5
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah, girls, you have a clinic at 9 o'clock sharp.
I mean, those who have a clinic can leave. They don't have to get late because of me.
No. Sir, you can continue for 10 minutes. I will just ask them in message. You can start, sir.
Okay. So I just want to give you some examples of what it was like working with these two people. So working with Stanley Robbins. There is no good writing, only good rewriting. Stanley Robbins. What happened? Well, when the first time I joined him as a co-author of Basic Pathology, as I told you, he would write a chapter, I would write a chapter, he would exchange chapters, I would comment on his chapters, he would comment on my chapters. So I'd written a chapter, the first one that I wrote, it was on male genital system. Okay. And so, I expected fully that he will make corrections, improvements, and I got it back. Then I sent him the second draft. And then I got, again, the same number of comments back. Then I sent him the third draft. It still had a lot of comments. At the bottom was written, there's no good writing, only good rewriting. This is Robbins' way of saying that we have to aim for perfection. And perfection is very hard to get. So you have to keep on trying. So that's what he meant by when he said, there's no good writing, only good rewriting. And I tell this to my other co-authors now, telling them how I learned this from Dr. Robbins. Ramsey Cotran. He's a phenomenal guy, absolutely phenomenal guy. Okay, very dear to me. So, I remember that in one of the editions, when I was a student and even as a resident in pathology, I never understood the structure of the glomerulus. I always found it very confusing. Where is the mesangium? Where is the base membrane? Where are the food processes, etc., etc. Okay, because I didn't have a three-dimensional view of the glomerulus. It was always sort of EMs and so on and so forth, which are two-dimensionals. There's no thickness you could see. So I found this figure with somebody in a rough sketch form, and I sent it to our graphic artist, and he made this figure. So Dr. Ramsey Cotran was a renal pathologist, so I sent it to him. And I said, what do you think about this? He said, well, this is a terrible picture. I said, why is it a terrible picture? He said, well, it doesn't look like an electron micrograph. I said, that's exactly right. It doesn't look like an EM because EM is a two-dimensional. This is three-dimensional. For the first time, I can see where the mesangium is and how the base membrane comes here, and where the food processes are, and where is the moment space, and so on and so forth. So he said, oh, well, if you insist, we will use it. Okay. Again, Okay. And then 6 months later, he called me and said, Vinay, that figure is very good. We will use it again. I said, what happened? He said, well, the residents and students told me it is very good. I said, well, that's good. I'm glad. Again, junior people telling the senior people. Aging books, like aging authors, can become obese. And, joke, we put this on a trolley and a chain. And, what happens is this, that books get thicker and thicker and thicker and long over multiple editions. We made the decision that we will not let this happen to Robbins. So from the very beginning, almost to the present time, the number of pages in the book have never been between more than 1,500, between 1,400 and 1,500, which is right now, I think the current edition is 1,300 and something. Okay, and people don't realize how difficult this is because it's easy to add information, but you want to keep the number of pages reasonable, then you have to take out something. And taking out something is as hard, if not harder, than adding things. Adding things is easy. What do you take out so that the book still remains useful and still is not too heavy and not too big? So we spend a lot of time when we do the revision. We spend a lot of time struggling over what to remove and how much to remove. Okay, I think this is probably the last slide. Textbook of the future. Book publishing is in transition from physical to online. I mean, you can see this now. There are print editions and there are online editions. Our most recent book, Robbins and Pathology, is almost completely online. Because online books can be updated, you don't have to wait for 5 years to revise them. And they have enhanced searching capabilities with direct links to journal databases. This is already possible. Many of the Elsevier books, which Robbins is a publisher, published by Elsevier, they are all bundled together, and you can go to there's a certain website where you can put in the search thing Staphylococcus, and it'll search microbiology, pathology, medicine, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and then you can decide which one you want to read and which one you don't want to read. And then online books can be linked to other online texts, other learning tools, virtual microscopes, quiz banks, image banks. So in our most recent book, Essential Pathology, there is a linked quiz bank and there's a linked image bank in there, something which we could not do on a print edition of the book. Online books will be customized and bundled to meet users' needs, just like the PCs are today. When you have to buy a PC, you don't go and say, give me, there are 3 models, give me this one. No, you say, I want this much memory, I want this much RAM, I want these features, I want this software, I don't want this software. And then Dell or whatever the company is, they make it for you and send it to you. So in the same way, in the future, what will happen is this. The course directors of physiology, pathology, medicine will say, you want this portion of Guyton, this portion of Robbins, this portion of Harrison, this portion of Cecil, and we want that to be our book. Very easy. It's online. The publisher just puts them all in a single bundle. Okay, all PDF files, and some places may say we want only general pathology and not systemic pathology, or some might say we don't want eye pathology in systemic pathology. Okay, if you don't need it, you shouldn't have to buy it. And I think that in about 15-20 years there'll be no physical text. People feel very sad about it because there's a certain joy in holding a book and reading it, which you don't get on the computer screen. Pathology of the future. This is for postgraduates since you're here. Genomics and proteomics will provide a personalized molecular diagnosis. Pathology report will include advice on targeted therapy. Say colonic carcinoma with mutational activation of MAP kinase pathway responsive to Kumar's missile. Okay. Diagnosis will change from post-symptomatic to pre-symptomatic by genetic risk assessments. Will there be histopathology? Yes, there will be histopathology. There will still be histopathology, and it will still be a useful tool, but it will become only one of the tools. And I say to you, the future is here. Are you ready? Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was like so good. So girls are clapping. I hope you can see them. There are lots of hearts flying and lots of clapping. It was so beautiful. I just I must tell you that it has been a tremendous journey that you have had. Wow, sir. Wow. I should say there's nothing less than wow. And plus few things which you told us is so beautiful, treated as equals, and the younger generation will bring the ideas, always brings the ideas. And I truly follow that also. And it's actually it's so good to hear that this is how evolution occurs, this is how the growth occurs. Like I have been reading Robbins from 7th edition, sir, and I have been buying a new edition every time, I must say you that, and I have loved the book. I hope all the girls do agree with me. The way the Robbins explains everything, there's no other textbook which is par it. No book matches it. I have read it through and through. It's beautiful. And the journey has been beautiful. And thank you for calling me that jasoos. I love that too.
All right.
It's wonderful knowing you, sir. It's wonderful interacting with you. Thank you so much for coming here and addressing our girls. Our girls are very, very happy here. We have our postgraduates and undergraduates both. Girls, I hope you would have learned a lot, and now you know why I always insist you read Robbins only. You understand? It's not a book. It's an evolution. It's the pathology. Thank you so much, sir, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As I mentioned in the beginning, okay, I mean, it is this kind of, okay, if you calculate my age in 1944, I'm 7, and I'm still writing, and I am still writing only because of the love, affection, and the thank you. Thank you for all of that. Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. All right. I will let you go.
Thank you so much, sir.